Okay, so we are going through our PFT 110 final exam review here. So we are looking at first, just kind of reviewing what we mean through obesity, and then we'll talk a little bit about like what the causes are before we get into some of the special considerations for obese clientele. So first thing we're looking at is kind of identifying what we mean when we say obesity, right? We are talking about a body mass index of 30 or greater. You can also see extreme cases of obesity where you have a BMI of 40 or greater, but body mass index is how we're going to categorize this. Now, this is just going to be a simple calculation of your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared, and that's how we're going to find BMI. So we're seeing these numbers here correspond with like what we are aiming for in terms of average BMI ratings. Now, what causes obesity? Well, obviously there's a lot of different causes, but generally, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the idea of like energy balance, right? If there's more energy coming in than there is energy going out, it will always result in weight gain. And if there's more energy going out than there is energy coming in, that will always result in weight loss. But that doesn't really answer our question of like, what actually caused it, like how, what lifestyle choices result in developing obesity. Well, obviously there's a lot of environmental factors like where you grew up, what you were exposed to. It can be lifestyle, like increases on technology. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that we as trainers face is like trying to teach our clients how to like, not spend time relying on technology. Teach your clients to park far away from where their destination, use the elevator, things like that. Those little bits actually burn energy passively throughout the day. And so if we can help our clients like change their lifestyle slightly, that can really help with energy expenditure. And then obviously there are inherited genes, hormonal factors, and things like that that do absolutely play a role when it comes to body composition. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to energy in versus energy out. And that's where we need to kind of understand the first law of thermodynamics, right? Which is basically going to say that energy in any isolated system will remain constant and it cannot be recreated, although it can change forms. That definition's not super helpful sometimes, like just the way it's written out. But basically what it states is that energy can transform from one form to another. So you can take like food energy and turn it into like mechanical work. But it cannot be created or destroyed. And destroyed is really the one that we kind of need to think about the most. Like if you consume extra calories, those calories have become part of you forever, unless you convert them into some other form, such as like heat and work and things like that. So, by, performing exercise activity, you are converting that energy, those calories, into work, right? You are converting it into push-ups and squats and walking and running and things like that. And then what happens is like your metabolism burns those things up and then you exhale the byproducts, and that's how that eventually gets out of your body. So weight control is really just an example of that energy balance, right? And so when I say energy balance, that's the relationship between energy in and energy out, right? Again, if you're in a positive energy balance where there's more energy coming in than there is going out, that will always result in weight gain. And if you're in a negative energy balance where there's more energy going out than there is energy coming in, that will always result in weight loss, which explains like why people deal with plateaus, right? Your body is reducing in size because you are losing weight, and eventually your body has found that energy balance. Or maybe you've hit a plateau because you've stopped moving as much because you are exhausted from a super intense activity routine. And so we'll kind of look more at that here in just a little bit. But when we're talking about energy balance, like that's all well and good if we understand it, but how the heck can we measure that stuff? If I want to like alter my energy balance, right? If I want to like get to a place where I can lose weight or gain weight, right? How do I create a positive or a negative energy balance? Well, that's where we understand like what your passive energy balance is in the form of like your basal metabolic rate or your BMR, right? So this is going to describe the rate at which your body burns energy by default in order to maintain its physiologic survival. So basically the way I like to think about this is like if you got conked in the head and you were completely unconscious, like there's still a lot of like passive physiologic processes that are taking place. So your body is passively burning energy at all times, no matter what. The amount of that energy is going to be about 60 to 75% of your total energy output for the day. most of the energy you burn is coming from your basal metabolic rate. And so that makes up the bulk of your energy expenditure. Now, obviously, if you're moving around, that's going to increase your energy expenditure, right? Again, if you do park far away, if you do take the elevator or take the stairs. And so that is where we talk about the thermic effective physical activity, or TEPA, right? Sometimes there's just TEA, by the way, sometimes just thermic effective activity. But that's the estimated energy to require your body to do work outside of your BMR, right? All the, like, obviously none of us just like sleep for 24 hours straight, right? That 24-hour shift we were asleep, that'd be our basal metabolic rate. But because we, go to work and go to school and, do our chores and wash the dishes and do all that normal stuff, and we exercise, that's going to mean that your body is expending extra amounts of energy in order to do all of that. That's going to account for about 15 to 30% of your caloric expenditure, with that number going even higher if you're doing a lot of energy expenditure. And then we got the thermic effect of food. Like, a lot of times we consider food the way of getting energy in, and that is true. But it also actually does take a little bit of energy to process that food. Your digestive system has to actually do a little bit of work there. So that's where we have the thermic effect of food. And that's an estimation of how much energy it takes to process whatever it is you are consuming. And that's about 10% of your caloric intake, with that number going down a little bit, depending on what your diet is, or maybe it'll go up a little bit. But generally, it's around 10% of your total caloric intake. So now, if we understand, like, those are kind of the three main ways we burn energy, and we are trying to create energy balance in order to lose weight or gain weight, right? I know that if I want to gain weight, I'm going to try to, challenge my body and move during like thermic activity, but I'm going to try to like save as much energy as I can. And then I'm going to consume plenty of positive energy. If I'm trying to lose weight, I'm going to try and increase the thermic effect of food by trying to consume foods that are going to, burn a little bit of passive energy. So making sure that I'm getting enough protein in my diet, for instance, having enough fiber in my diet, for instance. Both of those things are going to help me passively burn a little bit of extra energy. I'm going to try and increase my thermic effective activity by continuing to move around regularly. And I'm going to try to enhance my BMR by possibly gaining as much muscle mass as possible so that my body will burn passive calories. So how do we actually get to a place where we can start working out? Well, before we do any of that, we have to, before we can train our clients, we have to understand a little bit about like what their body, how their body performs, right? And so we're going to do fitness assessments, right? We're going to have a bunch of different categories of assessments here, but this is basically information that's really helpful in understanding a little bit about our clients' like medical and physical capabilities, right? So our two main categories of fitness assessments are going to be subjective information, which is all of the information that you cannot measure. Good examples of this are things like your PAR-Q and your general medical history questionnaire. With the PAR-Q being something that is designed to detect any cardiorespiratory dysfunction, and the general medical history questionnaire giving you a background on your clients, like medications and medical background, and hobbies and things like that. And then the second category is going to be our objective information, which is our measurable data, right? So you always want to make sure that you get your subjective information out of the way first. Always, always, always do this with every client that you've got, especially the PAR-Q. Because again, like this is going to be, this is going to help you detect if there is any cardiorespiratory dysfunction. If your client is like describing, yeah, I've had chest pains for the last week and they haven't really seen a doctor yet, it's probably not safe to exercise. They may have some cardiorespiratory disease that they are unaware of. So we're going to ask a series of questions so we can possibly detect those things. Now, in terms of objective assessments, these are really handy pieces of information because they help us, have measurable data that we can compare to later assessments with our clients, right? So really good examples of this. Good God, there's a stupid freaking motorhome just honking its horn outside of the house. So objective information, measurable data, right? These are going to be things like physiologic assessments, body composition assessments, cardiorespiratory assessments, posture and movement assessments, and performance assessments, right? So physiologic assessments are things related to like your cardiorespiratory system, your heart rate max, your target heart rate, blood pressure, things like that. Body composition assessments are things like skin fold caliper testing, circumference measurements, bioelectric impedance to get your body fat percentage. Bioelectric impedance is probably what you're going to want to use 9 out of 10 times with most of our extreme weight loss clients. Skin fold caliper testing tends to be relatively inaccurate. So we're going to use bioelectric impedance instead, because with skin fold caliper testing, it's very difficult to pinch and it gets less accurate. Whereas like bioelectric impedance is actually sending an electric current through the body. And if that current travels really slowly, we know there's a higher percentage of body fat because it's being impeded. And if that signal travels really quickly, we know there's a lower percentage of body fat because it's not being impeded. We've also got cardio assessments like the Rockport walk test and the YMCA 3-minute step test. Those are going to be really good for telling us like what kind of shape the cardiovascular system is in. Now, obviously, like we tested heart rate max and blood pressure and things like that earlier, but this is actually going to tell us how well they can perform certain bouts of like intense cardio exercise. And so then we can determine like an effective starting point for our client. And then my favorite assessments are going to be our posture and movement assessments, things like the overhead squat, the single leg squat, the pushing and the pulling assessment, right? Because like things like the overhead squat, they're going to assess your total body strength and mobility, right? Like we are testing how well you have core strength, neuromuscular control, like how well your body is sitting in a resting position so that we can recruit our muscles optimally. If we notice any like variations in those posture assessments, we know that there are overactive muscles that are pulling too hard and underactive muscles that are not pulling enough. And then lastly, we have performance assessments, which are not necessary every single time, but they're really kind of fun. They're just you versus future you, you know? They're really great assessments that kind of help your client see progress. So things like 1-rep max testing, Davies test, which is an upper body agility assessment, and then the Shark skill test, which is a lower body agility assessment. Or maybe it's just how fast can you run a mile, you know? I've had clients like read things in magazines. I had a client who read that you can tell your age by how easy it is for you to get up off the floor without using your hands and how long it takes you. It was like this thing that they got in AARP magazine. And so we turned it into an assessment. We're like, all right, well, we'll test you today and then we'll do a routine for a month and work on your core strength and mobility and stuff. And we'll see if it gets better. It was just kind of a fun thing, fun little competition between like 2 married clients that I was training. Moving out from there, if we look at nutrition information, which is obviously something that we're also probably going to do a little bit of assessing when we are doing our fitness assessments, just to learn a little bit about our clients, like diet and stuff. If we're talking about nutrition, we need to understand that like we want to make sure we're getting a good balance of all of our macronutrients, our energy nutrients, right? We're getting plenty of protein, carbs, and fats, while also getting lots of nutrient density with plenty of micronutrients like vitamins and minerals. And vitamins and minerals are vitally important because they allow you to have physiologic function. And also like, you know, by packing a food with tons of, you know, if you find something that has lots of calories in it, that tends to be pretty antagonistic towards your weight loss goals. But if you have something that has like tons of vitamins and minerals in it, that tends to not be very, you know, antagonistic. That tends to be something that's very helpful because micronutrients don't have any energy. They don't have any calories in them. So in general, we want to get about 10 to 35% of your total calories per day from protein, 45 to 65% coming from carbohydrates, and about 20 to 35% coming from carbs. Now, can you adjust these macronutrients up or down or in any variation? Of course you can. But a lot of people will do that with the goal of trying to boost their weight loss results. However, in the scientific community, there really is no consensus that one macro range is any better than any other. So like we talked about, we do want to get plenty of micronutrients in. And so that's where we're going to be focusing on what we call nutrient density, right? Nutrient density is distinct from energy density. And it's the measure of how many micronutrients are found in a particular food, right? So if we're looking at nutrient density, we're looking at things that are like dark leafy green vegetables, bright reds, bright yellows, things like that that have lots of like phytochemicals in them that give those foods their bright colors while also being packed full of vitamins and minerals. So the more nutrient density something has, the better, because you're getting plenty of those micronutrients that allow physiologic function to occur. Now, energy density actually is important. We do want to make sure we're getting enough energy, because if we go too low on our energy, our body doesn't respond very well to that. But generally, we want to stay away from high energy density foods that also are low nutrient density. Now, if you get a nutrient dense food that's also energy dense, is that okay? Of course it is, you know? But again, the primary goal here is to create like a caloric deficit. So a lot of times we're going to focus on low energy dense foods and high nutrient dense foods. One of the best ways to do that is to adhere to the USDA's My Plate guidance system. And so this was sort of created to kind of replace the traditional like food pyramid. And the idea is that your plate is going to consist of about 50% fruits and vegetables, 25% whole grains, 25% lean proteins, and a serving of healthy fats on the side. That's a really great way to kind of stick to that. My favorite version, by the way, is actually not the My Plate. I actually prefer the Harvard Eating Plate, which is very, 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 very similar. But rather than having like dairy off to the side, which is what you kind of see in like the My Plate, I personally really like the Harvard Eating Plate. Oh, there's the My Plate again. The Harvard Eating Plate, which you can see puts a little more emphasis on vegetables, because those tend to be a little bit more nutrient dense and have less added sugars, or just not added sugars, but have less sugars. And then fruits are also really, really important, because again, super packed full of nutrients. But then you're getting plenty of whole grains, plenty of healthy lean proteins, and then you're making sure that you're getting plenty of servings of water and healthy oils to go with that. So things like olive oil, avocado oil, stuff like that. This is my favorite version. That's a little bit different than the traditional My Plate. But again, you know, our certification is very much given out to us by the U.S. government, so we are definitely going to follow the My Plate system in general. So once we've kind of talked about nutrition, now it's time to kind of dive into training your client, right? So if we're coming up with like resistance and cardiovascular training for our client, generally the two most important principles that you're going to apply to a training program is that you're going to focus on total body training, and you're typically going to use a lot of circuit training. Both of these things are really great ways to increase caloric expenditure while also having a situation where you are building lean muscle mass, right? So total body training is going to use compound exercises where you're going to use several muscles and several joints simultaneously. So a squat, curl to press, a walking lunge to lateral raise, a step up to scaption, things like that. And then circuit training is a really great way to, you know, be very, very efficient while also elevating your heart rate, because it involves doing several exercises in a row with little to no rest in between. And that's a really great way to make sure that like your calorie burn is high while you're still working on your strength training. Now, when it comes to cardio training, a lot of times people think there's really only one way to do cardio, which is just to, you know, kind of start running and not stop, and, you know, generally just burn calories for like at one steady pace. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's only one type of cardiovascular training. That's called steady state cardio, which is basically step one, start jogging. There is no step two, you know? But we do know that we have like interval training as well, which is becoming more popular over the last few years. Now, what's very popular nowadays is high intensity interval training, but we do have like a medium intensity interval training as well. And so there's kind of a difference here between aerobic interval training and anaerobic interval training. Aerobic interval training is a little bit different because it's going to use longer, more moderate intensive exercise, whereas anaerobic intensity interval training is going to use high intensity, right? So this means that you're probably going to do much shorter intervals of high intense work so that you can have like rest and recovery in between. And so this is very much kind of training your aerobic energy system. This is going to really train your aerobic energy system as well, but it is going to vary the intensity slightly. And this is going to train your aerobic and anaerobic energy system because it's got maximal motor muscle recruitment due to its higher levels of intensity. So chances are like this would be like a 1-to-1 ratio. This would maybe be like a 1-to-2 ratio. And this would be like a 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-5 ratio when it comes to work versus rest. Now, the nice thing about like doing total body training, circuit training, and mixing it with your cardio is that it creates higher levels of what we call excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, which is an elevated calorie burn that takes place after you do intense exercise. So because like you ended up like aerobically burning up so much oxygen, your body burned through all of its stored energy. And so it's going to have to actually burn more energy to kind of build those stores back up over the next 48 to 72 hours, which is pretty great. Now, if you combine that with also just moving more in your life in general, that's where we're increasing what is called your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, right? Now, this is all the amount of energy that you're burning outside of the gym, right? Like I can create plenty of EPOC by working out really hard, but I can keep my NEAT levels high by making sure that I'm doing chores throughout the day, doing some active hobbies, even just standing up for a few minutes in between like you know, uh, desk or study time, right? Little things like that increase your thermic activity. So, you know, our greatest strategies for weight loss are definitely going to come down to addressing it in the gym through strength training and addressing it in the gym through cardio training. But we're also going to try and address a weight loss program outside of the gym by ensuring that we're working hard enough in the gym that it elevates our caloric burn and making sure that we continue moving in our normal everyday lifestyle in order to increase our caloric burn. Now, no matter what you do, and one of no matter how hard you're working, you could have the greatest program, the greatest nutrition in the world, but eventually you might experience a weight loss plateau. And a weight loss plateau is where basically the amount of energy going out versus the amount of energy coming in has balanced out. We've created energy balance. This is either due to physiologic adaptations, meaning your body has gotten stronger, so now it doesn't have to work as hard. So you need to find a new way to make that routine harder. Or maybe it's that your body has physiologically like reduced its size and now it's not burning as much energy as it used to passively. Um, or maybe it's because of non-compliance to a prescribed program. Maybe your client's getting frustrated and they're falling off the wagon a little bit. Maybe your client is struggling to measure their food effectively. Maybe they're just not moving as much as they think they might be moving. But at the end of the day, no matter what it is, it's all going to come down to the fact that it is a weight loss plateau has occurred because there is energy balance, right? There is no longer more energy going out than energy coming in. That energy is equal. How do we actually organize a workout session? We want to try to keep this plateau thing from happening as much as we can. We want to make sure that we are, creating workouts that are as effective as possible. So if we're going to do that, we need to make special considerations for our clients. Generally with obese clients, you're going to focus on having a really effective warm-up. You definitely want to put some emphasis on core training to make sure that their body is stable and moves safely. Resistance training where we can do our actual resistance training to build muscle. And we want to have like an integrated cardio program. So if we're going to organize that, right, in your warm-up, you want to make sure that you are doing a little bit of cardio in the beginning just to get your client's heart rate elevated but stable. During a lot of times in the beginning of a program, a client will struggle stabilizing their heart rate. Also, you want to make sure that you make certain adjustments for flexibility training because your client may not be able to get into certain positions. So being aware of that and modifying ahead of time, or being aware that you are going to modify ahead of time is a great way to kind of cut that off at the pass and make sure that your client stays comfortable and motivated. And the same thing goes for core training. This is definitely something we super want to focus on because core strength is so important for everybody, but especially for obese individuals who might have, extra forces, pulling on their spine. So you may need to consider modifying these things. Again, a lot of core exercises tend to take place on the floor, which is not comfortable for a lot of obese clients. And then resistance training, typically you're going to focus on maybe 2 to 5 exercises in your first 2 sessions with maybe 5 to 8 sessions later. But in general, we kind of want to go back to some of those principles we talked about earlier, right? We want to focus on total body exercises and compound movements like chest exercises, back exercises. You can definitely throw some leg stuff in there. And you do want to typically perform it as a circuit. Now, one of the other things you can do that is a good modification is you can also integrate cardio into your strength training sessions. A lot of times people will have like strength day, strength day, strength day with like a cardio day in between. And that can be fine if you're doing advanced styles of cardio. But if you are, blending that cardio into your routine where it's like, okay, I just worked out my chest and I need to let my chest recover. While I'm recovering, I'm going to do some jumping jacks. Little things like that can be a great way to integrate a super high calorie burn into the middle of your routine. So no matter what, if we know all these principles of like how to create really great workouts, that's excellent and it's fine. However, at the end of the day, the greatest program is still going to have some struggles. Your clients are going to have certain challenges. So, things like missed sessions, non-compliance to programs, maybe your client's overly sore or just hungry. Any of these things can be overcome as long as we have a strategy in place to sort of work on those. So if your client is missing sessions, revisit with your client like, hey, why were we motivated in the first place? Like, is your motivation waning a little bit? Like, is it, are you getting a little burnt out? What do we have to do to get you more excited and, stick on this routine? Because if we're going to meet our goals, we got to make sure we stick to the program. How do we make a program that's easy to stick to? Maybe it's nutrition compliance, same thing. Maybe your client's struggling because you've got a great diet picked out, but it doesn't fit very well with the rest of their family. So maybe there's like some family troubles at home where it's like, they're like, oh, but we want to go out to dinner and do this and that. Maybe it's because your client is actually like really thirsty. Maybe they're not actually getting enough, to drink every day. And so their body is creating hunger pangs in order to, bring in food. Maybe they're having trouble knowing what to shop for. Maybe they're having trouble meal prepping. Again, make sure that we understand, ask our clients these questions, figure out what they're struggling with so that we can come up with a strategy to overcome those challenges. And then sore muscles. This is a very, very common one, right? What if your client feels really sore, too sore to exercise, right? Well, you can focus on doing a little bit of core and flexibility training for a little bit until they start to feel a little more comfortable. And then they can make up for that maybe lack of energy burn that occurred that day later on in the week by just doing some walking or some light cardio. And then again, if your client is extremely hungry, figure out what's causing that hunger, right? Is it because maybe they're not getting enough micronutrients, or maybe they're not getting enough of a certain macronutrient? But what is the root cause of that hunger? When you find that, we can make adjustments. It's like, you know what? I noticed that I tend to overeat at lunch, and I always get tempted to eat out at lunch. Okay, great. Let's put a snack of a couple hours in between like your breakfast and lunch. We'll reduce both those calories just a little bit and then take some of those calories and put them into a snack so that we can help with those hunger pangs, right? And we'll focus on something that's very fibrous and maybe a little high in fat and protein, so it'll leave you feeling fuller by the time you get to lunch. So that is some general tips. There are going to be a few questions related to program design, like making sure that we understand how to apply stabilization, strength, and power, and some of the questions related to like individual phases. But I think you guys are going to crush it. Break a leg, everybody, and I will see all y'all tonight for the review game, or I will see all y'all tomorrow for our normal lecture. See ya.